Today's discussion will be presented in 3 sections, since we are recording this session for a radio broadcast on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. Our first section will focus on understanding the challenges agencies are facing in implementing or using VDI. Next, we will discuss the impact of VDI on requirements for IT skills in the workforce. And lastly, we'll explore the government's move away from traditional desktop PCs towards a more mobile environment, adopting tablets and smartphones. Feel free to post questions and comments during the session, and we'll try to get them answered online. We are particularly pleased to welcome our moderator, Jason Miller, Executive Editor and Reporter for Federal News Radio 1500 AM. Let me turn over the reins to Jason to begin today's discussion.
Welcome to what's going to be a fascinating conversation today and a topic every Chief Information Officer and Senior IT Manager is paying close attention to. Our panelists today are Tom Sasala, Chief Technology Officer for the Army Information Technology Agency, Terry McCall, the Deputy Joint Program Management Office of the Defense Intelligence Agency, Ryan Sobel, the Director of Enterprise Mobility Solutions for IronBow Technologies, and Keith Maresca, the Senior Sales Manager for Dell Federal Cloud Client Computing and Secure Multi-Level Security. Gentlemen, welcome to the panel. Before we get started, I'd like to set some context to our discussion. Nearly every federal CIO is looking at some form of virtual desktop infrastructure, or VDI. It's becoming as ubiquitous as cloud computing, mobility, and big data discussions. VDI, in many respects, is one step to move toward the cloud, and in other respects, it's its own approach that may or may not include cloud computing as we know it today. Many agencies see VDI has better and more secure approach to mobile computing and telework as well. Others see it as a way to move from that thick client setup that has permeated most organizations over the last 20 years and back toward a thin or even zero client setup for desktop computing. Several studies over the past year have showed that agencies see VDI as a gateway to mobility and as a way to improve cost effectiveness and efficiency in their network. Now, at the same time, the challenges to implementing VDI are pretty typical. Do business applications integrate easily? And of course, security is always a concern. Some say VDI isn't more secure than traditional desktops because it's the endpoint device that causes most of the headaches for security folks. But there are plenty of benefits as well for VDI. According to Gunnar Berger's August 2012 blog post for Gartner, he says VDI is easier to manage because thousands of desktops can run off a single central image. This also means security is improved because you have only to worry about securing that one image. Berger also says VDI improves performance because at the time it takes to get data and how you can access the data from any device at any access point. So we know the risks, we know there's benefits, and like any technology, agencies need to figure out how best to calculate whether those benefits outweighs those risks. And that's where part of the decision comes in of how agencies can figure out the return on investment for VDI. How long will it take? 3 years, 1 year, 2 years? Well, we're going to discuss that today. Most would agree that the cost to implement VDI is about equal to implementing thick clients or your typical desktop PC. But it's the longer-term savings where VDI tends to come out ahead. The question is just how much ahead? You have to understand these things as things as configuration planning, storage costs, and licensing as you figure out your ROI. So with that context in place, let's turn to our panelists. Once again, today our panelists, Tom Sasala, Chief Technology Officer, the Army Information Technology Agency, Terry McCall, the Deputy for the Joint Program Management Office for the Defense Intelligence Agency, Ryan Sobel, the Director of Enterprise Mobility Solutions for IronBow Technologies, and Keith Maresca, the Senior Sales Manager for Dell Federal Cloud Client Computing and SecureView Multi-Level Security. I'm going to turn first to Ryan, IronBow Technologies. There's a lot going on around VDI. What are you seeing from your customers?
Yeah, great question. So I appreciate you having me on the show today. So I have the pleasure of working with many agencies out there from the civilian side to the defense side. So I get to kind of see it all out there and what they're sort of doing, what works, what doesn't work. So, really what I'm seeing is, you have agencies out there that are using their classic virtualization infrastructure, and the question is, do we bring that to the desktop side? How do we make that? How do we leverage that infrastructure to make our workers out there more efficient, more effective? How do we bring that back, all that data back into the data center on premise, that is, for security? So what I'm seeing is, okay, how do we take that virtual infrastructure that's already in place and move it to the desktop? A lot of decisions that need to be made there. Are there CapEx savings? Are there OpEx savings in there? Is it worth it to go to virtual desktops? So I'm seeing that lately with all the different agencies out there, and they're trying to figure out how do we make this transition? How do we make it easier on the end user so that in the morning they're not coming in, hitting that power button and waiting for something to boot up. They already can get right into their desktop, their approved image that is, and start working and being effective. Not to mention, how do we do that in the office, but how do we take that on the road? When we're on the road and we're mobile, which most folks are these days, how do we take that on the road so that we can log in securely, get that information that we need securely, and then go about our normal day and be productive? So I'm seeing the transition from the data center side, on the virtual side, to bring it to the desktop side. But really, I'm seeing, well, how do we get there, right? How do we manage our desktops? How do we make sure they're functioning efficiently and effectively? So that's really what I'm seeing there, is how do we make that transition, but also how do we manage that?
So from what you just described, it seems like a lot of agencies have virtualized their data centers, or at least have moved in the direction to have a certain percentage of virtualization. But now they're saying, okay, what else can we do from there? Is that what you're hearing from your customers?
Yeah, I'm really kind of seeing that across the board, just saying, okay, we have a virtual infrastructure in play, on-prem that is. Now, how do we move that towards the desktop side? Like, how do we make that transition?
All right, let's move over to Tom Sasala from the Army Information Technology Agency. You guys seem to have made that transition. Tell us about what you guys are doing.
Yeah, so we actually started a pilot probably about 18 months or so ago on VDI to kind of work through some of the variables that you talked about earlier. Really, is it going to save us money? Is it going to increase our security? Is it going to make us more effective and more efficient? A lot of times the private sector will look more at profit and loss, and the government's kind of metric for success in large part is the effectiveness and efficiency and whether or not we can provide better services to our customers. So my office is actually leading the modernization innovation for the Pentagon in the Pentagon Reservation and all of our constituent locations. And so we started this pilot a while ago. And it was a bit of a rocky start, to say the least. We intended to do a kind of analysis of alternatives, look at lots of different technologies, but it didn't actually work out that way. Joint Staff approached us probably about a month into the planning stage of our pilot and asked us to press forward with a solution very rapidly to get them to full desktop, virtual desktop capability by the end of calendar year 13. And so that really, we changed our plans. We got a good partner in Joint Staff. General Bowman is an excellent customer. He's very demanding, but he also provided the senior top-level support necessary for us to get there. So we rapidly did a design. We did market surveys, market analysis, talked to a lot of different vendors to find out what the options were. We ultimately ended up choosing a converged platform, brand new sort of virtualized platform that was a Type 1 hypervisor. Typically, you see this in the data centers. We had a traditional, more blade SAN architecture in our data center and still do today. We chose this converted architecture for VDI to save us a little bit of labor costs. And that's what we're seeing right now from the deployment as we moved from the pilot into production. Probably we started the migration in September, so about a year after the pilot started. The pilot actually went IOC in April of 13, and then we went to production in September. So it was a very rapid sort of turnaround, faster than anything I've really seen anything in the Pentagon move, quite frankly. We went from not having anything at all to a full production deployment in less than 18 months, in large part because of the good senior leadership we got from the Joint Staff, as well as a kind of a firm commitment on behalf of the Pentagon. And we did deploy a true multi-tenant environment to the Pentagon. We can add new clients, new customers, new tenants very rapidly. It was one of the first, if not the first, true multi-tenant deployments that we've experienced in the Department of Defense. So that was a unique challenge for us to provide that separation of concerns and separation of duties across our different tenants. And we're working with not only the Department of Army headquarters, but the Marine Corps as well right now to see if they want to join the pilot. And so that's kind of where we started and where we are now today.
And when the joint staff says they want it by a certain date, I mean, there's a lot of stars on their shoulders. You do it.
Yes, very much so. General Bowman really set the mark, and I'll be 100% honest with you. That's probably the only reason it moved as quickly as it did. He asked us a number of times to slide things a little bit to the left, and there was. I really kind of pushed back on them in some regard. We wanted to do some prudent engineering. We wanted to kind of survey our existing desktop environment and see what the technical parameters were of our existing desktop environment. So we chose to actually put some special software on not only our ITA desktops and laptops as well as a joint staff to kind of do a baseline, and so we can compare what it was versus what it is. And that actually gave us some very interesting results, and now we're continuing to collect the metrics and the telemetry from the production deployment, and we're seeing a continual increase of efficiency from an end-user perspective, decrease in login times. Obviously, the patching and the security is significantly better than it is in our current production environment, and we're using that data to actually give it to the Department of Army headquarters, to CIO G6, and see if they're interested in moving the Department of Army into the virtual environment as well. So
fascinating. I know we'll get more into it. Let's turn to Terry McCall from Defense Intelligence Agency. You guys are part of the lead of the eyesight program, which I think plays a big role. It's going to use VDI quite a bit. Talk a little bit about what you guys are doing.
Sure. For a DIA, we've used VDI to help us actually implement a multi-level security solution, MLS solution. On our MLS front end, we use Raytheon's Trusted Thin Client. On the VDI back end, we use both VMware for the hosting environment, and then Citrix Zen Desktop for the load balancing and for the provisioning. We basically use those technologies to provide services for 18,000 thin clients across 2 network domains, hosted out of 7 locations globally around the world. It's basically the big benefit for us has been in user mobility, the fact that we do have a global customer base, and so this gives a lot of flexibility for customers in terms of whether they're logging in at different thin clients, different buildings, actually different locations around the world. That really represents kind of the legacy MLS solution that we have implemented. As you mentioned, we're transitioning to the IC desktop environment, or ICDTE. The solution there is similar. It's just that our emphasis there is on one network domain versus multiple domains at this point. All the benefits that we see in that are the things that you kind of highlighted in your introduction. The biggest piece for us, obviously, is getting to a single desktop image. We went from 33 desktop images down to 1. So that has huge benefits for us in terms of being able to operate and maintain, simplifies the process greatly, and helps us tremendously with our security and keeping of the currency of our patches.
I want to ask about the domains. When you talk about domains, are we talking about classified, unclassified, or are you talking about unclassified but just specific areas of the presentation layer, I guess?
Actually, different security domains. So
Okay.
it would be different classified domains, actually. And the main benefit there to us is, again, using thin clients, is we don't have to do multiple thin clients under people's desks, where they're doing one thick client for each individual domain, which, again, has huge cost savings for us.
You get rid of that switch, right? Wasn't there a switch or something? I've never seen it, but
Get rid of the
I've
switch.
only been told.
Yes, get rid of the switch on top of your desk. Get rid of the portable heaters underneath your desk. All those thick clients that are residing there.
And I think the people enjoy the portable heaters. Let's move to Keith Maresca from Dell. You guys are seeing something else from your clients as well, both in the civilian side and the DoD side. Give me a sense of VDI.
I think the way the trend is going across government is the need to get out of the cycle of, every 3 to 5 years, we're clearing off all these old desktops and laptops, and then, having to dispose of them securely because you have all this data residing there. So you have to make sure that you've wiped out disks, you've transferred data. It becomes a major level of effort. We have to simplify that. And going to a virtualized environment not only improves your cybersecurity position, but it also makes that transition a lot easier. Now it's all residing back in the cloud or data center, so data access is much easier. Also, you do have the availability. Now you have some place on your desk that you can actually put your coffee mug, because you don't have all this other hardware there, by having one device, be it a zero or a thin client. The additional advantages we're seeing is you also change your power. There's a power savings involved. You go to some of the wise zero clients we have, we're talking about 7 watts versus maybe 150, 175 watts with a desktop, depending on what you have. So you add that up over a building, it starts equating to savings. So we're seeing this movement to, I need to simplify my environment, I need to have better security, I need to get rid of all these potential Washington, could be on the front page of the Washington Post about, hey, I lost this laptop, to it's all back now behind the firewall. You have control of it. Plus, most importantly to the user experience, people can access their data when and where they need it securely. And that's the key here, and that's what, with our partners like IronBow and stuff, Dell brings to the table.
I want to pull on the string a little bit when you talked about the wattage, and I think 7 watts, 150 watts, people can see the difference just by numbers, but are your clients really looking at that power savings? Because as you know, if you run a company, anything gets caught up in the G&A and overhead. Well, I don't, as an IT person, do I really save money if I use less power? Do I ever see that money? It really goes back to my boss's boss's boss. What are you hearing from clients?
And there are some cases where you do hear that. But again, it depends who you talk to. You go to an installation, and you talk to the civil engineer and go, oh, by the way, if you go and take 3,000 computers, take those out and replace it at 7 watts, maybe 15 watts, you're going to see a savings. He or she can go communicate that going, I like this solution because the infrastructure is not going to be taxed as much. And you're going to see that more and more.
In the past, on the power consumption, we've seen that, and sometimes, it does get buried. But now there's certain modules out there, such as chargeback, right? So now you have certain organizations within an organization that you can use and automate modules like a chargeback module to say, okay, hey, listen, we're using VDI now. And oh, by the way, here's what your power is running right now. And oh, by the way, in six months prior, without using VDI, this is what your power was. So now you can actually really kind of get into the numbers, and you can see that cost savings by using some chargeback modules.
Tom?
So I think power is actually part of a larger soft cost issue with VDI. So we're seeing not only, we did compute the potential power savings if we were to move Department of Army headquarters forward. It's in the $1 million range. It's a non-insignificant savings. However, the biggest cost we're actually seeing is in labor, not only in terms of the amount of time it takes to patch, the amount of time it takes for us to manage our image or the handful of images, but even on the software deployment side, it was really astounding to me the number of people that we have out in the field who all they do all day is go to desktops and install software and fix configuration issues. Our mean time between failure on 0 clients is significantly lower than it is on traditional desktops and laptops.
Keith, you got about 30 seconds.
2 things. One, you'll see a 0 client or thin client. We have those that are out there 10, 12 years versus, you rarely see a laptop or a desktop that lasts that long. The other piece you have is if you change and modernize your back-end infrastructure, like with our 12G servers, fresh air cooling, you reduce those costs, so you even have savings back in the data center. So there's savings to be had all around. And lastly, when you have an individual and their desktop croaks and they sit there for hours waiting for the IT guy to show up versus swap out with a few cables, the thin client, and they're back up where they left off. Tremendous savings right there in manpower.
Huge opportunity cost. Now, Terry, I know you want to say something, but we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll pick back up. You're listening to the panel discussion, Transformative Technology, Desktop Virtualization in Government, sponsored by Dell and IronBow Technologies on Federal News Radio 1500 AM.